The following is a Hoop Ball presentation. Welcome to the Fantasy NBA Today podcast.
I think I want to come up with something fun to say at the beginning of a new week of Fantasy NBA Today. Something just that I can say at the beginning of every Monday to sort of get us all settled in and get my brain right for a week of podcasting. Get you guys right. Like, all right, cool. Week is back. We're ready to do this thing. I don't have any idea what that thing is, but I am, just know, hunting for it. And it's probably never going to show up. So, with that in mind, welcome to Fantasy NBA Today. It's the best I got right now. I'm Dan Besbris. This is a Hoop Ball presentation. And Fantasy NBA Today, box score breakdown, Hoop Ball Nets broadcast, Hoop Ball Kings broadcast, Hoop Ball Lakers broadcast, all of our shows brought to you by our buddies at Hawaiian Isles Kona Coffee Company. HawaiianIsles.com is the website. You can search for Hawaiian Isles on Amazon. You can tweet at them at HI Kona Coffee on Twitter because that's where the tweeting happens. Hit them up. Check them out. Try their coffee. It's what gets Brew through the day. I can tell you that much. He's a coffee maniac, and now he's only drinking Hawaiian Isles. And I'm guessing, this is, again, not my area of expertise, but I'm guessing the caffeine content is a little powerful as you switch up from garbage market brand to Hawaiian Isles. So give it a shot. HawaiianIsles.com, again, is the website, and we'll all be quite grateful. This is Monday's show, which means we've got a couple of things on the docket. Number one, quick review of any breaking news that came out this morning, which, a couple of small things. They will impact tonight's games, but I don't know about anything going forward. We'll have the big old reverse chronological lightning round as we do on every Monday's show. We're going to review some betting stuff. I know a handful of you guys are pretty into the sports betting side. We're not going to do, it's going to be the same as usual, just a little bit, a dabbling, kind of a review of where we've been sitting on things, where the projects are right now, working on tracking different stuff on that sports betting side, see if maybe we can make those few of us here that are in this little niche market a little more wealthy. Not exorbitantly so. And then, of course, we'll preview what is, by all accounts, a relatively small Monday card. Just my favorite types of cards, you guys have heard me talk about this on the show, are the 6 to 8 game dockets. And we had 7 on Sunday. We have 6 tonight. We have 6 tomorrow. And then only 8 on Wednesday, which is kind of exciting. 6 on Thursday. I can figure this out. 6 on Friday or 7 on Friday. This is going to be a really fun week for me because every card has the right length until you get to the weekend, and then it's big Saturday, tiny Sunday, and then the best NBA day of the year. A week from today, Martin Luther King Jr. Day, is an NBA holiday, and it's the best. It's games. I know I've done this before. It's games from 9:30 a.m. here on the Pacific Coast all the way until 7:30 p.m. Start times. That's the start times. So the games actually run from 9:30 a.m. to 10 p.m. It's 12 and a half hours of consecutive NBA games without any break in between them. The only time you get really close, next Monday, there's a Sacramento-Brooklyn game that starts at 12:30 Pacific time, 3:30 in Brooklyn. And then there's a New Orleans-Memphis game that starts at 2:30 here on the Pacific Coast, 4:30 in Memphis. So that's the only time where the last 15 minutes of the Brooklyn game and the first 15 minutes of that New Orleans-Memphis game, they're probably going to overlap just a little bit. You almost can see a sliver of light, but not quite. Just talking about it gets me all excited for MLK Day. It's the best, man. We're going to have to probably do a weekly lineup show on Sunday night, I would think, for that one, for those premium subscribers here at Hoop Ball, because I don't see any way that with, well, maybe Brew could do it at like 8 in the morning. I don't know. We'll talk it through. We'll figure out a way to make sure we can get you guys some information. But it's going to be tough because lineups lock a week from today at 9:30 a.m. for the whole week. That's tough, man. You're not getting news even on those late games for another 8-9 hours. So there is going to be a little bit of a crapshoot next Monday, but we'll figure that out. That's next week. This week, we've got all these wonderful days of 6 to 8 games on the docket, which means I can actually keep my thoughts a little bit more organized. And so with that in mind, let's give a few of them. Number 1, Kyrie Irving is out tonight. It sounds like largely a rest game. They're calling it a quad, but Kyrie has already said he's planning on playing in their next ball game on Wednesday. Marcus Smart is also out with an illness, so the thinning of the herd. This is what we talk about with generally Boston and Miami. When you can knock a couple guys out of the rotation, then the other guys actually seem pretty good. So guys like Marcus Morris are going to do more. Terry Rozier is going to get bumped into a starting role. You might see a decent game or two out of Jaylen Brown. And then probably it goes back to being too many mouths to feed in general. Kyrie obviously has been above the fray. Marcus Morris, amazingly, has been above the fray. And that's about it outside of Marcus Smart on the steals specialist side. Well, where's Gordon Hayward at these days? Honestly, I haven't looked in a week or two. He was hovering right around the top 100, and he's at 125 now, so he's actually petered out a little bit. I hadn't even really been paying attention to him. I ended up with 0 Gordon Haywards this year. It's kind of the same thing with Nick Batum. I ended up with 0 Nick Batums this year because these guys just went a little earlier than I was targeting them, and thank goodness for that because they've both been a real pain in the butt. Dodged a bullet. And that's the only news, really, on this Monday morning. Maybe there'll be something else by the afternoon, but that's where we sit right now. Reverse chronological lightning round. Let's get into the good stuff, folks. Why delay? We'll tell you about some of the things we got going on at Hoop Ball in between segments on today's podcast. No reason to delay getting into the good stuff now, right? You guys complain enough about how I don't get into fantasy quick enough on this show, so we're going to launch right into it. Philly and New York, Toronto and Washington, those are the early games on Sunday, and both revenge angles covered, so that was sweet. Neither one of them was a money line upset, though. It was both situations where the underdog was able to hang in there, and that's all you really need to do when they're catching a boatload of points, as certainly the Knicks were. They were catching 8.5, lost by only 3. Kevin Knox played a ridiculous 44 minutes in this game, but he was hot, so Fizdale just left him out there. He had 31 points, 7 rebounds, 2 steals, no assists. Kevin Knox not really passing yet in his young career, and 4 3-pointers. This was, by all accounts, a 9-category type line, or, 6 categories, basically. But for the most part, he's more of a points league kind of guy. And you can look at his line scores to get a feel for it. When he's out there for 30-something minutes, he's going to sort of fall into 5 rebounds, but he doesn't pass. He doesn't really steal or block. The turnovers are actually a little bit higher now than they were earlier in the year. Percentages are not great. He's shooting 38% from the field, 71% at the free throw line. But he's scoring a bunch. When he gets the playing time, he's up around 20 points a game, and so, that's worth just as much as a handful of assists in points league formats, and that's why that's where he belongs. We heard before the game that Tim Hardaway Jr. was available, but he did not play. So they figured they'd just give him a little bit more rest, which was annoying because when a guy's available, you assume he's going to do something for you, and then he posted a goose egg. Although, games cap formats, that's actually probably better than him playing 7 minutes and then tapping out for the ball game. So at least he didn't blow a games cap number for you. Elsewhere in this ball game, Noah Vonleh, 5 fouls in 18 minutes. I don't want to call him a buy low because he's not going to be a top 75 guy, but he's going to be a top 100 guy, and so maybe he starts to hit waiver wires, or maybe you could throw some, hot for a week kind of pickup in that direction and see if you could pry him loose. He's generally going to be seeing minutes. I don't think the plan going into this game was to play Damian Dotson for 36 and shift everybody down. But as it turned out, Luke Kornet got hit in the face 3 more times by Joel Embiid, and this time it pissed him off. Kornet 23, 5, and 5 in this one. Really strong showing. And I have thoughts on that front as well. Emmanuel Mudiay continues to do more points league-y kind of things. The Knicks are an interesting team, and they're also a very confusing team. And here's my best, and this is an educated guess. It's a hypothesis, right? Because I'm not in their clubhouse. I don't know exactly how this whole thing is going to shake itself out. But from a chronological standpoint, this is how the events are playing out in my mind. First and foremost, I think you do see Tim Hardaway Jr. this week. It seems like this was mostly precautionary, that hamstring thing. If it was really a thing, they would probably just say he's going to miss a week or two. There's no reason to lie about it unless it's really a short-term thing. So I'm not worried about him yet. We got a report that Kristaps Porzingis was set to be evaluated in February, and then, of course, the internet lit up with fantasy enthusiasts saying, is it time to stash him yet? Being evaluated doesn't mean he's going to play. And my guess is that even if he gets on the floor, it's going to be just for a handful of minutes right at the very end of the year. So no, you're not picking him up. You're not stashing him. If you're in a head-to-head league, maybe he's one of your pickups like the last week of the playoffs. And you're like, hey, you know what? Kristaps has a back-to-back, which he's not going to play in. Maybe he'll see 14 minutes in this game. No, you're not squatting on him right now. I know the upside is insane, but they're just not going to push him. So that's two of the creatures out of the way. Enes Kanter is the third creature in this mix, and I do think he's getting traded or bought out in the next, basically 3 weeks. All-Star break is 1, 2, it's like 3.5 weeks from right now. Or is that the trade deadline? That's 3. Yeah, trade deadline is 3.5 weeks from right now. All-Star break is a week or two after that. I'm sure they're shopping him. We've heard the rumors about the Kings, but of course, once you hear the rumor, that means that the deal is probably off the table. But obviously, he's being shopped. Obviously. I shouldn't say I assume he's being shopped. He's definitely being shopped around the NBA. Is he going to play again for the Knicks? I would think yes. I think he does come back and log a few minutes just to sort of keep the rust from accumulating. And that's going to be annoying for the next 3.5 weeks. So for that stretch of what we'll call about 25 days, might actually be exactly 25 days, it's going to be hard, I think, to own any of the centers in New York. Kanter will end up likely being the best value among the three because his per-minute ability is the best. He scores, he rebounds, he has good percentages. That's tough to find. Mitchell Robinson has the second highest ability to be fantasy relevant in limited minutes because of blocks. Simple as that. Because if you can rack up 4 blocks in 12 minutes, then you could be a fantasy asset in 12 minutes. And Luke Kornet is actually the third most interesting player in terms of per-minute ability, which is saying something because he's actually not that bad from that standpoint, but he is third in this particular set. As it stands right now, he's the only healthy player among the three, or, healthy with quotation marks around it, whatever you want to call it. He's the only one playing right now. And so he's obviously a guy you can dump into your lineup until you hear Kanter is going to play. Or Mitchell Robinson is going to play. I think if you hear that Robinson is coming back, here's the if P then Q segment of this analysis. If you hear that Mitchell Robinson is coming back, I think you could still start Kornet and assume he's going to get the lion's share of the minutes as Robinson works back into game shape, because he's been out for a long time now. If you hear that Kanter is coming back, I think you bench them all. Maybe you start Enes, but more than likely you bench them all. If you hear that Kanter is moved, Luke Kornet and Mitchell Robinson are both speculative pickups to see how the minutes shake out, because you got to believe they're going to give them both some. And then you drop whichever one ends up not being useful, or maybe they both end up being useful for different reasons. In that instance, I think Robinson has the easier path, again, because if he can just stay on the floor for 20 minutes, he can be a fantasy asset. He's not Rashawn Holmes. It's not that consistent, but it's sort of Nerlens Noel-like, right? Where you can just be out there. You might fall into 4 or 5 rebounds in 20 minutes, but you're out there for the potential for 2 steals and 2 blocks. Okay, that's the center position. What does that mean right now? Well, right now, again, you can run Kornet out there until somebody says they're coming back, and then I'd be really nervous. Start him at the same time. Mario Hezonja has been putting up some really nice numbers on a per-minute basis. He had 9 and 5 with 2 assists and 2 steals in this ballgame, and that's decent. That's a plus fantasy line, if unspectacular. He went a long stretch in the fourth quarter where he didn't do anything, and the Knicks as a team went a long stretch in the fourth where they didn't do anything, and then they made a roaring run with about 4 minutes to go, and that was disappointing because Hezonja, I think, had like 7 and 3 in the first half, and so in the second half, he had like 1 bucket and 2 rebounds. But he's a good foul shooter. His field goal percentage has actually been decent now that he's playing exclusively with the second unit. Second unit is fun for guys that are slightly better than other second unit players, because overall this year his field goal percentage is terrible, but when he's picking on crummy backups, he's been pretty efficient. Sort of the Jeremy Lin syndrome. Should he be on your fantasy team right now? Yeah. They're finding him 22 to 28 minutes a ball game, and that's enough to sustain value in basically steals, free throw percentage, some rebounding, not enough to be a positive impact guy, some threes and some points. Those are the areas where he can improve your basketball team. The other stuff I wouldn't expect too much. So we'll call him a maybe. I think he's useful right now. I wouldn't drop anybody who has a slightly more positive outlook. That was a long one to get going, right? That was a long first game to break down. But fear not, the other ones will be a little bit quicker. Toronto, Washington, a little double overtime fun. Some huge fantasy lines in this game. Bradley Beal, 43, 10, and 15. Good gracious. Otto Porter had a big one. Trevor Ariza nearly triple-doubled. Sad game for Thomas Satoransky because he shot 2 for 13. If he makes another 3 even of those shots, then you're talking about 10, 7, 2, and 2, and that would have been a solid game, but it is what it is. And you know I'm dodging one name here because we talked about him a whole bunch on Thursday and Friday's episodes of the podcast. You guys did not like the way we titled that Thursday show. You did not listen to the show before you started yelling at me about it. The title said that Thomas Bryant was struggling. And a bunch of you were like, he's not struggling, he's getting yanked around. And that's when I said, listen to the episode, friends. Just go back and listen to it, and you'll hear my 5-minute rant about how Thomas Bryant kept going up against the elite centers of the NBA, and he was getting pushed around. And for a while, in this ball game, he was getting pushed around. Toronto went small and just went around him a bunch of times, and Jan Mahimi came in, and he played his weird minutes in the first half, and then he just disappeared. He was done, and it was great for everybody. Jeff Green logged some minutes at center, but that did not prove to be sustainable, and so Thomas Bryant, 34 minutes, 18 and 11, a 3, a steal, a couple of blocks, super efficient. Not sure why he had to turn the ball over 4 times, but otherwise, stellar line. And unfortunately, nobody dropped him in any of my leagues. I was really hoping that those 4 bad games was going to get him punted out to the waiver wire. It didn't happen. Hopefully you guys held on that front. Danny Green was great. Good to see him starting to rebound a little bit. Maybe that day off was nice for him. We don't know what the heck's going on with Jonas Valanciunas. Supposedly, he could be back by the first week of February. We'll see. Milwaukee, Atlanta. Nothing on the Milwaukee side other than cool to see Eric Bledsoe have a really nice ball game. Just strong showing all the way around, but there's really no fantasy news there. For Atlanta, Jeremy Lin logged 26 minutes, but didn't do much with them, and that's really surprising. 7 points, 2 boards, 5 assists, and a steal. He's been in a little bit of a shooting slump lately, but he's getting bonus minutes right now. Will that continue as Taurean Prince works himself back into game shape? And will that continue when Kent Bazemore makes his return? Which, who the hell knows when that's going to be? Dwayne Dedmon missed this ball game, and it didn't change much for most of these guys. Or Omari Spellman got back into the rotation because when Dedmon is out, then they need somebody to back up Alex Len because, I know. Len had 12 and 8, but he's not very good. And he fouled out of this ball game as well, or could have been more fun for him. DeAndre Bembry finally didn't totally roast you in the percentage category, but he had 6 turnovers. And Jeremy Lin is supposed to be that stabilizing presence, but just had a terrible shooting game. So what does this mean for Atlanta? Well, we're obviously watching Taurean Prince to see what his minutes cap looks like going forward. And if he can play like he did in this ball game in longer stretches, then he should have a window. I honestly don't know why he didn't take advantage of it earlier in the year. He's always been, I say always, but, third year. He's always been a second half kind of guy, and so now we'll wait and see if that transpires again for him. But no, you're not buying in on Omari Spellman. As soon as Dedmon's healthy, he goes back to being the third string guy. Trae Young finally had a game where he wasn't terrible. Alex Len, no. Kevin Huerter, we've talked about him a bunch of times on this podcast. I don't think his fantasy stat set is very good, and he's playing gigantic minutes, and his number of shots is just going to keep dwindling as this team gets healthy. So fine if you want to roll the dice with it. He's mostly three-point shooting. He had that big game where he exploded for a bunch of rebounds, but generally that's not his style. John Collins, still no defensive stats. Weird. So Torian Prince we're keeping an eye on. Jeremy Lin we're keeping an eye on, and then the returns of Bays and Dedmon, but I don't think you're making any moves based off of this ball game. Houston lost in Orlando. What the hell? Yes, Jonathan Isaac was not very good. He did have a 7-6-4 with a block and a three-pointer, so a little bit better than usual, but still just not doing anything. And Terrence Ross is warming back up again, which is also very bad for Jonathan Isaac, because when Ross is hot, he's gonna grab a few extra minutes, and I think he's a guy you could sort of run with while he's knocking down a boatload of three-pointers and while he's not going high volume 35%. On the Houston side, Austin Rivers had a better ball game, but he remains firmly planted in that points league category, and that is that. Golden State Dallas, not really an interesting game. Maxi Kleber is a name to watch. I've seen him get picked up in a couple of leagues. He got some spot starts when Dallas was playing teams with multiple big men. Like he started against Minnesota when they were dealing with Cat and Taj Gibson, and they needed someone to start alongside DeAndre Jordan. But the fact that he came off the bench for 26... Well, did he start this ball game? Yeah, he started this ball game. He started this game against Golden State, who's not really known for being a giant team. Played 26 minutes and had 6 and 8 with a steal and a block. He has one of the better block rates in the NBA, which is sort of an interesting footnote. He also shoots the free throw well. He's at 81% from downtown. He will pop a three every once in a while. The question is, can there be any measure of consistency? Frankly, I'm concerned on that front. Dorian Finney-Smith's minutes were backed off a tiny bit. Dennis Smith Jr. was out, but that shouldn't play a massive role on the power forward spot. So what does this mean? Did they have to go taller because of Kevin Durant and Draymond Green? Was this another matchup thing? It could be. It could be. There's also a possibility that it ends up being something that sticks. And he's not eligible at center. So you're talking about a guy that could play forward for your team. And right now he's averaging 1.2 blocks in only 19 minutes a game. If those minutes increase to 25, you're talking about a potential 2-block-a-game guy. Then he goes from top 170 to top 100. So keep one eye on Maxi Kleber. I don't think he's going anywhere off the waiver wire. He's picked up in a couple of leagues that I'm in, which, again, talks about basically how competitive those are. But he's still available in a number of them, and he could serve a very interesting role, especially on a team where my punt assist team that I've talked about before. He could end up being a really interesting player there. So one eye on Kleber. The other German on the Dallas Mavericks. Portland, Denver. Not much there. Evan Turner's going to see big minutes because Mo Harkless, we don't know what's going on with that, but I'm not digging into the Denver other guys. Gary Harris, due back soon. Will Barton played 14 minutes. It's just not worth it. And Cleveland, LA. Alec Burks had a big ball game, but no, I don't know how many times I'm going to come to the pod and tell you guys you're not trusting Alec Burks. He's been scoring better lately, 19, 17, 13, and 17 in his last 4 games in a row. So the scoring is up, and I suppose that's good for him. But he's not a 9-category guy. He just isn't. He's not. He's got a couple of defensive stats lately, and the inflated rebounds and assist numbers. This is not going to stick. Sorry, Alec Burks fans. He's one of the better options on that team, but no, he's not a 9-category guy. Points league, maybe. Same deal, Rodney Hood, although he only played 24 minutes in this game for whatever reason. Jordan Clarkson had a rare off night, returned to L.A., didn't go as planned, I suppose. Maybe went exactly as planned, but the plan was to go have some fun the previous night. Either way, the Cavs won this game, and that is not good for the Lakers. That's a bad loss, and that's one that's going to sting. Saturday. Plenty of games left to go over on Saturday. We only talked about 14 teams so far. Detroit, not interesting. Clippers, not interesting. Okay, fun. We were able to hop right over that one. That's good. You know, a minute saved, a minute earned, that sort of thing. Memphis and Miami, Saturday morning. This was one where thank goodness I got this line early. I got this as Memphis +5, and they just ended up hanging on. This game was tied with 45 seconds to go, and Grizzlies got outscored, I think, 4-0 over the last 45 seconds, and that was close. On the Memphis side, you're seeing JaMychal Green either getting healthy or hot, one way or the other. They got a lot out of their power forwards in this game. JaMychal Green and Jaren Jackson Jr. both played well. Marc Gasol was okay. Mike Conley was good, but the big news, of course, Kyle Anderson, slow-mo, hurt his ankle and is set to miss 2 to 4 weeks. Good news is that's holdable. 2 to 4 weeks, you can stomach that. I know everybody's like, should I drop? Should I drop? Nah, come on, guys. Unless your playoffs start in that stretch, don't drop. Just deep breaths. Deep breaths. Everybody's got a billion injuries right now. Believe me, I know, because I look at the other teams I'm about to play, and I'm like, can I weather this storm? Because half my team is out. Everybody's got somebody out. So just squat on it, because whatever garbage player you're going to pick up for the next week or two, or 4 garbage players that you're going to rotate through, they're not going to be as good as slow-mo, and someone's liable to stash him before you can. So sit on it. The bad news, if the injury to Anderson itself wasn't bad enough, the bad news is that in his stead here, the Grizzlies went small and played Shelvin Mack at shooting guard and Garrett Temple at small forward, and Justin Holiday still played only 16 minutes. So he's on the waiver wire. A lot of people are like, should I pick up Holiday? I'm going to say no. Let's wait and see how this plays out. I'll tell you what. I'll tell you right now. Is Memphis playing tonight? Yes, they're playing tonight. Memphis-Houston. That should be an interesting one. 5 o'clock game Pacific time. If Justin Holiday plays 13 minutes or more in the first half, you can just pick him up on the spot. Anything less than that, you're not. For Miami, Hassan Whiteside was out with the flu, so Bam Adebayo got to play 38 minutes, and he was solid. Not spectacular, but solid. Josh Richardson was good enough. Not great. And then we had a hot Justice Winslow game, and he this is what he does. He bounces between games where he just crushes you and games where you probably accidentally put him on your bench and he goes completely bonkers. I do think the fact that he's posting pretty big assist numbers means you can kind of weather the bad percentages, because he really is hurting you in free throws, and he doesn't knock down many threes or get many defensive stats. But over the last 2 weeks, this is a funny thing too. Over the last 2 weeks, he's averaging 1.3 3-pointers, 14.5 points, 5 boards, 6.5 assists. And if I told you those 4 categories, you'd be like, no way this dude is outside the top 100. Well, he's number 117. And it's not even turnovers. Only 1.3 turnovers over that stretch. It's the medium volume 61% at the foul line. It's the sub-1 steals. It's the 0.2 blocks. He's just not really built for 9-cat. He's not even really built for 8-cat right now. He's built, tailor-made for points leagues with the way he puts up numbers and does so on strange percentages. If you can get him into your lineup for these types of games, outstanding. But there's almost no way you can do that without accidentally leaving him in your lineup for the January 2nd game against Cleveland, where he shot like 3 for 17. Or the game in Atlanta where he missed all of his free throws. Those things add up in a roto league, where less so, by the way, in a head-to-head league. If you just catch him on a week where he doesn't have one of those total duds, he can be really helpful for your head-to-head team, but it doesn't just disappear after a week in roto. So maybe that's how I should phrase it. He's tailor-made for points leagues and head-to-head leagues, and he's not for 9 and 8-cat roto. React accordingly. Other note on this ballgame, Tyler Johnson got back up to 28 minutes, but didn't do a whole lot with them. The D-Wade farewell tour continued with another 11-shot game, and then Derek Jones Jr., who I have picked up in a couple of spots, and then promptly was just outstanding in this game, but only for 18 minutes. 11 points, 5 boards, a 3, 2 steals, a block. Yes, he missed 2 free throws, which is a pisser. He's not particularly strong at the foul line. You just hope he doesn't go all that often. And the amazing thing is that in 18 minutes, he can actually still be fantasy-worthy because of the steals and blocks, because of what's generally a very good field goal percent, on top of getting you a 3-ball in those games. He'll shoot a 3 while also being very good at dunking. So it's like 3 dunks and 1 for 3 at the free throw line or the 3-point line. And so that ends up averaging out to a nice field goal number. The problem here is that I don't know how much he's going to play. I have him in a couple of spots. In the leagues where I desperately need defensive stats, he's just in there all the time. In the league where I don't, it's a little iffy. That league is a little bit more of a stash player, where if somebody gets down or if he plays his way in front of some of his teammates the way he has a couple of times lately, he posts those 29, 28-minute games. Those are going to be really interesting lines for him. But, react accordingly. We're at that time of the year where sometimes fit is more important than just overall value. The reason that Derek Jones Jr. comes up in this discussion is that there's a real chance that he could play his way into enough minutes to just be like a really good standard league value. And you don't want to leave that on the wire, even if his stats aren't something you need. Because if the next 2 weeks roll out and he averages 25 minutes over that stretch, you don't need his stats, fine. You could move him for somebody you do need in the top 100. Boston lost in Orlando. We're not going to talk about the Magic again because suddenly they've now beat Boston and Houston back-to-back. On the Boston side, we already talked about Kyrie and Marcus Smart being out, and they're, team you keep an eye on the streaming side, but that's about it. San Antonio, Oklahoma City, the rematch of that wild game on Thursday night, and the Thunder this time tried to get the ball out of the hands of LaMarcus Aldridge, and it worked. They held him to 17 points and 9 rebounds, tried to make everybody else beat them, and the Thunder's ability to recover on defense continues to be very impressive, and they won by 10 points. Dennis Schroeder had a better ball game, but still he's not good. I don't know, he's 67% owned in Yahoo leagues. He's a more points leaguey guy, too. Name value, I guess. And he had those big games when Westbrook was out for a couple of weeks, but, maybe I'm losing my mind. Pretty sure he's not ranked for it. Yeah, 9 category. He's number 160. He's been bad this year. Just got news, by the way, as we were broadcasting, that Clint Capella is out for the Rockets. I don't even know what that's going to mean for them. You can only play Nene like 20 minutes. That's rough. They're going to have to go small. You might see some P.J. Tucker center minutes coming up in this one. I don't think there's an obvious pickup for that ball game. New Orleans, Minnesota. Karl-Anthony Towns had a 27-27 game. Whoa. Dario Saric played 16 super efficient minutes, but Taj Gibson still saw the lion's share at 27 minutes, and neither one of them was good enough for fantasy purposes. There was some news in this ballgame, though. Number one, Niko Mirotic got back up to 27 minutes, so that's good news, and maybe you could buy low on him if somebody thinks this is the line you're going to be getting going forward. I doubt it. On the Minnesota side, Jeff Teague re-injured his ankle. We don't really know what the timeline looks like for that. I picked up Tyus Jones in a couple of spots with the hope that I could squeeze a game or two out of him. They play tomorrow after having a couple of days off, and we still don't really know what the deal is with Teague. But certainly, if he's out, then you probably want to put Tyus Jones in your lineup because Derrick Rose is expected to play, and behind him, they just don't really have much in terms of guards, just guard play in general. Because Andrew Wiggins is not a guard. I know he plays shooting guard for long stretches, but he's a small forward, I think. Oh, boy, his efficiency is just so bad. I don't think you're doing anything at the power forward spot. So it's Tyus Jones, and then also mentioned here on the Karl-Anthony Towns front, I don't think that you trade him for anybody right now. He's been incredible over the last few weeks. He's number 2 in fantasy purposes over that stretch. I think maybe the only player you would trade him for at this point would be Anthony Davis. I think you're looking at Karl-Anthony Towns being a top 3 guy easy the rest of the year. He's behind AD and James Harden over the last month, and over the last 2 weeks, he's behind, I believe, just Anthony Davis. Yeah, and he's ahead of James Harden because of the free throw stuff. He's shooting the ball well, shooting 52% over those couple of weeks. He's averaging almost 16 rebounds a game. It's actually kind of amazing that AD's still in front of him. Testament to what Anthony Davis is. He's just a freak. The number 1 pick is the number 1 pick, and that one, if you overthought it, you killed yourself. He's winning leagues by himself. Well, Cat is not that far behind right now. So hopefully you were able to maybe buy him when he was sitting in that top 15 range early this year. Not that you could buy low, but maybe you could have got him for like a Dame. I think that was something I said. Hey, I'll like send out a Dame for Cat trade straight up. Dame was top 7 at that point, and Cat was sitting around the top 20. I don't know if any of you were able to pull it off, but if you did, you're probably feeling all right now. As Dame has settled back, and he's been good. You know, Lillard's been still a fun guy to own, but he can't do what Cat's doing right now. Enjoy. You're not trading him for anybody other than Anthony Davis. Simple as that. Phoenix knocked off the Denver Nuggets. That was a nice win for the Suns. Kelly Oubre, 26-11. He's been big the last couple of ball games with Devin Booker out. DeAndre Ayton had 22 and 13. Rashawn Holmes had 14 and 7. DeAnthony Melton had 10 assists, 4 steals, and a block. Mikal Bridges, people are really frustrated with him, and I understand it because you look at this line and it looks pitiful. But a 3-ball, couple of assists, 3 rebounds, a steal, a block, 2 for 4 shooting, didn't turn the ball over at all. 7.2 usage rate. It's hard to have a usage rate that low. Yes, he lost time to Oubre, who was playing his tail off in this ball game. But to me, there's still a usefulness for that, and it's probably more of a punt points type of guy. But his 3-and-D credentials are outstanding. And for the DeAnthony Melton stuff, yes, he's going to go away when Devin Booker comes back. But as Jonas Nader pointed out on our Big 3 podcast last week, if the Suns have to shut Booker down at any point, then Melton's a guy you want to jump on. I don't think now's the time, unless you want to stream him, drop him, and then pick him back up again. I think we're a little bit early on that. Charlotte, Sacramento, Nick Batum actually had a decent ball game, which was mind-blowing. And then the question obviously becomes, could he potentially do it 2 games in a row? I doubt it. He's still owned in every single competitive league that I'm in, which is really surprising. But he's been in 127 and 9 cat. So, he's not killing you. He just hasn't been good at all. Old man Marvin, 6 cash counters in this ballgame and 8 rebounds. Gotta like that. That's without the 3-ball dropping. If he makes one more of those threes, then you're talking about a real juicy ballgame. Bismack Biyombo had a serviceable game. Willie Hernangomez sucked, and they're both terrible. Neither one of them should be used. You just have to wait out the Cody Zeller stuff. Nothing of note on the Sacramento side. With Marvin Bagley back, Nemanja Bjelica is going back to being what he appears to be, at least when you watch him on TV, which is a large tire on 2 legs. Chicago, Utah. Bulls were able to hang in there in this ballgame. That was surprising to me. Bobby Portis missed it with an elbow injury. There are some sources that called it a sprain. Other ones just called it soreness. It sounds like he'll be back pretty soon. He got his arm tangled up with Kevin Durant, and he wasn't happy about it. And so Jabari Parker got to play for 19 minutes, and he was actually decent. On a team that struggles mightily to run a half-court offense, he could actually be useful. I don't think they're going to play him enough for it to be relevant. Chandler Hutchison finally had the game that we all wanted him to have 2 weeks ago when we threw him into our DFS lineups, and then Chris Dunn and Zach LaVine and Lauri Markkanen and the regular guys were okay. People are starting to bail on Wendell Carter Jr. I wonder if you could get him for like a top 125 guy. I would. And then for Utah, with all 3 point guards out, it's been a lot more Donovan Mitchell, Rudy Gobert in the high post. Amazingly, had 8 assists in this ball. I mean, life was good against the Chicago defense. Royce O'Neal has posted 2 decent games in a row, but overall his fantasy game is actually, prior to these 2 games, hasn't been very good throughout his career. You can go back and look at the games where he got big minutes before. It didn't matter. So I'm not sure that I'm buying in on it. It sounds like Dante Exum is less than a week from coming back. So, yeah, not for me. Not for me. If you feel like running that one, you can go for it. I'd rather take a chance on someone like a Derrick Jones Jr. Anybody we missed? Let's go back to Friday. Make sure we didn't dodge any teams. I don't think we talked about Indiana, but there isn't much there. It sounds like Miles Turner is getting close to coming back, which will be nice because he was dominating before he went down, and so that kind of stunk if your team was relying on him to carry you in the blocks category, which you should always have somebody else ready to go, but hopefully he'll be back and ready to roll. And I think that might be it. I always have to do this at the end of these reverse chronological lightning rounds and look back and go, what am I missing? It's got to be somebody, right? How could there only be one team? Simple. Somebody add a back-to-back. That's how we get the odd number. I think that's it. I'm going to call it, and then if somebody didn't play Friday, Saturday, or Sunday, that meant we talked about them on last week's podcast, so it shouldn't matter anyway. I want to thank everybody that took a chance on the in-season premium membership last week. We made a little push here on the podcast, and there's actually, I believe, 24 hours left on that same deal. So if you're still kind of hemming and hawing about it, today's the day. Today's the day to bleep or get off the pot, as they say. So a big thank you to those that checked it out. As I said on last week's podcasts, the in-season premium membership is on an early January deal that ran from the 5th of this month to the 15th, so it ends tomorrow, where the in-season premium membership is down to $9.99, and you can use a coupon code. Crazy, right? We've totally lost our minds. Brewski and I talked about it over the weekend as well on this podcast. You can use a $3 coupon code to knock that $9.99 price down to $6.99. There's almost exactly 3 months left in the NBA season. So for $7, $6.99, you get 3 months of our in-season premium package. And I asked Brew on the Friday show, and I don't even remember all the things he said were included on the written side. But I can tell you on the audio-visual side, it's worth it by itself, even without the written content. And there's all sorts of tools that you get that, I'm trying to look at it while I'm talking to you about it here. You've got, let's see, the layup line. You got DFS stuff. You've got the periodicals. You've got the schedule grid, the streaming tools, the depth charts, the start-sit stuff, the projections, the rankings, the dynasty stuff. That's all the written side. On the AV side, you have, let's see, 1 show on Sunday, 2 on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. You got 6 live interactive shows with the Hoop Ball pros, myself included. I'll actually be hosting today's weekly lineup show later on this afternoon. Ethan Noroff and the Chef, they've got Sunday's show that talks about waiver wire pickups, and then you've got all these awesome pros throughout the week, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday evenings. Hank and JC, Eric, Riaz, Mike, Brandon, Josh, Surio, Corbin, the list goes on. And you can just ask them questions about your fantasy team. Hey, guys, it's me, Jimbo, trying to decide if I should be dropping slow-mo. And they'll say, well, it depends on your team. Tell me what you got going on. You'll be like, well, I've got also Bays and JV injured right now. I'm in 5th place in my head-to-head league, and if I take another loss or two, I'm going to fall out of playoff contention. And they'll look at it, and they'll analyze that for you. And they'll say, look, in that particular spot, you probably have to drop somebody and just make sure you can stay afloat while you wait on your other guys to come back. It'll be team-specific. You can ask them anything. You can ask them what they had for breakfast that morning. Those shows are in the evening, usually right around the time that the late games get going. So most of the early games are done. You have some thoughts on the individual games taking place. So if you have pick up and drop questions, it's really cool. And again, $6.99 if you use a coupon code. We have a bunch of them. Try the coupon code NEIL, N-E-I-L. My buddy Neil's name, Neil Rochlani, N-E-I-L. Coupon code, knock $3 off. And go check it out, $3.99, hoop-ball.com. Click on the premium tab. And then under premium, choose Go, and then in-season premium is the one you want. Crazy low rate. Try it out. 3 months of it. If you love it, next year maybe you come back and do it for the whole season. Become a loyal hoop baller forever. DFS contest likely will be Wednesday this week. We don't have the room open yet. I'm hoping we get that link available by later on today when we do obviously send out the automated email. If you're interested in getting on the email list, let me know. We had 98 out of 100 people in that contest last week. Just freaking amazing. And I imagine at that rate we'll fill it up this week, and then DraftKings will have no choice but to give us a bigger room again. So more prize money. Woohoo! Love it. We'll update on that as we find out more. Tonight, the 14th of January, 6 games on the docket. Boston, cut down to their prime, heading into Brooklyn in Is this a revenge game? I got to look it up. It is. It's a Brooklyn revenge game. And now I hate it because of all the late scratches. This totally changes everything. I don't believe that this line was up last night. And now we know why. Because we were waiting to find out who was actually on the floor for the Boston Celtics. And now we know that Marcus Smart and Kyrie Irving are both out. And so the line drops. And Brooklyn is only a 3-point underdog in this game. And so everybody's like, oh, no Kyrie. Awesome. Let's go Brooklyn, which is what we would have done in the traditional revenge side of things. But now, because of the injured star, this is one to leave alone. Boston has shown themselves to be very resilient when guys are out. They have these other dudes that can easily step up. You're going to see more Gordon Hayward, more Marcus Morris, Terry Rozier. All of these dudes are very competent. And so there isn't the type of drop-off where if Irving and Smart were out on a less deep team, yeah, you can understand the line swinging like 3 points. And I think it was going to be 5 or 5.5 last night, so it was like 2.5-point swing here. With Boston, I don't think it should move that far. So the value flips likely from potentially the Brooklyn side now maybe to the Boston side. And so you either leave it alone or you even go injured star on this one, but I'm probably leaving this thing alone. From a fantasy standpoint, not much there. Boston, you've got the streamers, but that's about it. Memphis and Houston. Houston coming home off a loss in Orlando yesterday. Memphis on double revenge in this ballgame. They've lost to the Rockets twice. Grizzlies played better their last time out, but now they lost slow-mo. So how does that impact things? Who do they go to? How do they find offense against a Houston team that can put up numbers? And now you got no Clint Capella. This was a line, I believe, that was available last night. It was Grizzlies catching 6.5 points. What does that mean now with Capella out, is the question. That's a big advantage for Memphis. They have a huge size edge over Houston now. Jaren Jackson Jr., JaMychal Green, Marc Gasol, all those guys can pound the interior. I don't know what Houston's going to do about that. They'll have to figure something out, and they're going to try to run those guys off the floor. But it's going to be now speed versus grind. I love the fact that I got Memphis plus 6.5. I don't think it's quite the same injured star theory with a guy like Capella being a late scratch because he's not considered a superstar. The line looks like it only moved a 0.5 point as a result of that. And they desperately need him. It's not like there's a guy that can just step in. That's what makes the injured star theory so nice, is that the other guys think, well, we'll just do a little bit more. I mean, they've already been running like a 6-man rotation lately. Fantasy-wise, well, I mean, we'll find out if anybody does something for Houston. I'd be surprised. Eric Gordon's still out. It's Capella's thumb, so I don't know if he's going to miss additional games, but maybe we get an idea of what's going on. And do we see any Justin Holiday? As I said earlier, if he plays 13 minutes in the first half, you probably just grab him on the spot. Charlotte, San Antonio. No revenge angles in this game. Fun, right? We finally get a game where we don't have any betting stuff going on. Spurs have been playing really well. Charlotte has been playing very poorly without Cody Zeller, and I don't see any reason why that should change for this ball game, but you never know. NBA is a weird thing. Not really watching much from a fantasy standpoint. We sort of know who should be owned on these two teams. Detroit is in Utah, coming off a nice win over the Clippers. Blake Griffin went huge. They've got a task on their hands. It's also a revenge game. Pistons lost at home to the Jazz last month. Nothing really from a fantasy standpoint in this one. Maybe keep an eye on Royce O'Neal. I'm still not fully buying that he's going to be a sustainable asset, even for the week that these point guards are all out. Portland to Sacramento. This is a tough back-to-back after an emotional loss in Denver last night. This is also a revenge game for the Sacramento Kings. I like them in this one. Sacramento favored by 2.5. Fantasy stuff, nothing. Pelicans Clippers, no real fantasy stuff there. This is a low fantasy impact day by all accounts. And the line Clippers by 2.5, that's probably a fairly accurate line. No motivational angles in that ball game that I can think of off the top of my head, or the simple stuff at least. Neither one of these teams coming off a big loss. Pelicans trying to get right with Niko Mirotic getting himself back and hopefully getting healthy. And we'll watch it and enjoy. So not much from a fantasy standpoint tonight. More betting angles than fantasy on this 6-game Monday card. And that brings us towards the end of the program. This was Reverse Chronological Lightning Round Monday, brought to you by Hawaiian Isles Kona Coffee Company. Check them out, hawaiianisles.com. Coming up later this week on Fantasy NBA Today, you'll have me tomorrow. Mike Apatria will join us on Wednesday. We'll do a little DFS preview. I had an okay team last week in DFS. I was in the mid-30s, I think, when all was said and done. Tried to kind of swing for the fences, and a couple of my cheap guys were terrible. And that'll bite you every once in a while. I only did one lineup in that one. I think Mike was just outside the money, if I'm not mistaken. We'll double-check on that. Thursday, likely you will have me, and then, of course, Brewski on Friday. We'll be live this week on Friday after missing last week's live show, so we'll be back to take your questions on Friday's episode, and that is the upcoming week. Again, next week you got Martin Luther King Jr. Day, so plan accordingly. We'll remind you about that every day, probably, because I love it. I love that day so much. That's all I'm thinking about as we wind towards it. Man, that takes us into we're in mid-January now. That's crazy. That's it. Okay. You've heard me rant and rave. You've heard me talk to myself. I think that's officially the end of the podcast. I'm Dan Besbris. This is Fantasy NBA Today. At Dan Besbris on Twitter. At HoopBallFantasy. At HoopBallTweets. Go check out the in-season premium stuff. Ask me questions about it if you have any on Twitter. And with that, I bid you adieu.
This has been a Hoop Ball presentation.